When we become laws unto ourselves and become the measure of all things, then we determine which humans are valuable and which ones are not. This is the problem with our never-ending quest for autonomy. We sacrifice our ability to reason, our moral accountability, and our sense of human value. There are many philosophers with high academic credentials ready to argue that certain human beings simply aren't intrinsically valuable. Look at this. Peter Singer runs on a utilitarian philosophy that says what is good is that which benefits the largest number of people, and what is bad is that which unnecessarily harms people. And yet, Singer argues that human babies, after they have been born, can be killed by their parents. Those babies, Singer argues, are not really persons because they lack the mental capacity to value themselves. The parents, on the other hand, have the capacity to assign value to the baby. So if the parents don't want or don't value the baby, or find that caring for the baby imposes a hardship on them, then the baby has no value and can be disposed of. Singer is even on record as saying that a fetus or a baby with Down syndrome has no more value than that of a pig kept for livestock. Singer's conclusion is that, quote, membership of the species Homo sapiens is not enough to bestow a right to life. And he's not even alone in his thinking, is the truly scary part. So where does one even begin to comprehend, to respond to such ideas? In our culture of mass confusion, fueled by our desire for autonomy, does anyone even have standing to object? Think of what Singer and his people are advocating. Parents have the autonomy to end a baby's life because they have the authority to determine whether the baby's value justifies the burden of caring for it. And if that burden impinges on the parent's autonomy, then the baby can be eliminated. This is really the essence of unfettered human autonomy, to become God, but without the benefit of divine wisdom. We have tried to become gods, unaccountable to anyone or anything. We've created a commodity out of the most vulnerable members of our own species and consumed them as a kind of burnt offering to self-appeasement. How can we ever say that there's a moral obligation to help anyone? Those victimized by poverty or famine, what's the difference between killing a baby that causes me discomfort or inconvenience and letting a suffering adult die for the same reason? Singer may respond that poverty-stricken people are true persons because they have the cognitive ability to value themselves. But that distinction is completely arbitrary. If cognitive ability is the marker of human value, then those who don't meet that arbitrary threshold would have no value. Less self-aware people would have less value. The less intelligent would have less value, because something like cognitive awareness is notoriously difficult to measure, right? Who would get to decide who has value and who doesn't? Again, we're back to the law of the jungle, where animals eat the weak. The world seems to be spiraling out of control, and yet we still cling to our idol of autonomy, relying on our own ingenuity to deliver us. Is it possible that we have become so confused that we mistake our decay as flourishing? Have we started to mistake progression for regression? The ironic thing truly is that when autonomy robs us of our reason, our moral accountability, and our value for individuals, what does it leave? What does it produce in the end? What becomes of us? But how, with our reason atrophied and our value for each other diminished, it will be easy for any group or charismatic and powerful leader, say, or individual, or a whole group of them, to start undermining some people's freedoms to serve other people's autonomy. This sounds exactly what is happening these days. More and more frequently, we are seeing case after case in different instances of the state threatening to take away your freedom if you fail to bow to someone else's autonomy. I can give you scores of examples. We won't get into those, but being a Christian through all of this is tough. Right? But yet, it all kind of comes full circle back to the Bible and Christianity in the end. So hear me out on that. This pursuit of autonomy drives increasingly ferocious attacks against the Bible as a standard for truth and conduct. Many oppose the scriptures as an outdated method of control that arbitrarily suppresses human behavior. This stems from a complete failure to see the differences between unfettered individual autonomy and true freedom. They are not the same. The Bible opposes the former and champions the latter. I mean, how arrogant of any of us to think the Bible is too outdated of a document to lift us out of our modern mindset. For perhaps it's not so out of touch after all. If you look back in the Old Testament, when the Hebrews were enjoying a healthy freedom under the sovereignty of God after they were delivered out of slavery, yet the book of Judges tells us of Israel's rejection of freedom and its quest for autonomy, a desire to have no authority above themselves. In other words, they preferred preferences over truth. So each time the people's thirst for autonomy landed them in trouble, God sent a judge, a person who took his authority from God, to guide the people. But they rejected God's authority time and again in favor of their personal sovereignty until the resulting chaos became too much. Eventually, the people cried out for a king. As the Bible puts it, this was a rejection not of the judges and prophets who had guided Israel, but a rejection of God himself as the determiner of what is good and valuable. So the result was disastrous. With few exceptions, the succeeding kings were wicked despots, guided by their own autonomy. The people did not seek to root out bad leaders with truth, facts, or moral reasoning, and kings constantly seized power through treachery, lies, and murder. It was just chaos, right? So bad leaders were constantly supplanted by equally, if not more, corrupt leaders because truth was no longer an arbiter of human conduct. So you understand now? So you see what I've been saying. So what I'm trying to point out here are the cultural and the moral consequences of dumping truth as a guide. And that whole story in the Old Testament was such a good example. We may end up with autonomy, but certainly something far from freedom. So what I'm advocating for each one of us, individually in our hearts, is to search once again for the source of true freedom. It's no surprise that I believe that God provides us with true freedoms that come from clarifying the confusion that has saturated our culture and blinded us from seeing who and what we are slowly, horribly becoming, and from seeing who and what we were intended to be. And we need to know the truth that our quest for autonomy is what enslaves us. We are in chains that we cannot feel and in prisons we cannot see, and they are both of our own making.